Gail Anderson heads up the Muslim-Christian dialogue effort at the Minnesota Council of Churches, the Taking Heart program. And last week in her email blast out to churches, she was talking about Christmas for Muslims and how difficult this season is for Muslims in Christian and Muslim dialogue. The Christmas story is one of the most troubling aspects of Christianity for Muslims, the idea that God could become human. The incarnation, it's a theological term, God in the flesh, or God with us, Emmanuel. For Muslims, God is wholly other and one. And so the idea that God could be divided into two or three parts or participate in any way in our humanity apart from speaking through prophets is just impossible. Well, I'm not Muslim. And I think incarnation is absolutely the very best of Christianity. It is true that it makes for very messy theology. Trying to hold on to one God, but saying that in some way or another God also has three different faces. And if you've ever spent any time trying to read Trinitarian theology and all the efforts that have been made over the centuries to kind of try and make sense of that idea, it's challenging. And our partners in the Abrahamic tradition, both Jews and Muslims, look at us Christians and we say that we are monotheists, and they just smile and say, sure you are. But it's actually the messy part that I find the most attractive about the Christian story. Or more precisely, the idea that God is right here and present in the midst of the messiness of life, the messiness of our humanity. That, to me, is the beauty of the Christmas story. The idea of a child of God born in a stable, in the midst of those animals, in a back room, not a palace, and then living out his life, laughing and eating and drinking and thinking and teaching and getting angry, and then, yes, being arrested and tortured and crucified on a cross. And all of that to say that God was there and present in the very best and in the absolute very worst of humanity. And the idea flowing out of that theology of incarnation, God in the flesh, that if you want to know where God is, you don't have to look any further than the person sitting next to you. When you look into their eyes, you are looking at God. And when they look in your eyes, they are also looking at God. And then in particular, where there are suffering people, or hungry people, or grieving people, or other children born in stables, there is God in the midst of them. And if you want to be with God, you be there. To me, that is the best of Christian theology. But it's also true that from the very beginning, Christianity has struggled with the implications of this idea. And part of this is because Christianity was born in a time and in a place where there were already many dualistic religious ideas floating around in the air that held, in one form or another, that the earth was corrupt. And everything about it was corrupt. It was a mistake. It was created and run by some evil demigods. And that the whole purpose of the religious life was, first of all, to come to see this, and realized that it was all evil. And then to find a path that allows one to escape into the Spirit so that one can escape eventually and ultimately out of this world. First, while still being here in body, but gone in spirit, and eventually up there or out there somewhere, in heaven or in an afterlife. The Apostle Paul would be influenced by this in his understanding of the purpose of Jesus. I mean, Paul obviously is born a Jew, and as a Jew, has a very firm idea of God and the goodness of creation. But he would make this distinction between flesh and spirit in his writings. Flesh as being corrupt and spirit as being what we are trying to live into. And flesh is what we are trying to avoid as much as possible. And he would write in Romans that the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. The creation was subjected to futility in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. The whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves who are the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. And so Paul's waiting for the end and living in the Spirit and trying to stay away from the corrupt flesh. Now, in fairness to Paul, because he's anchored firmly in his Judaism, what he's hoping for is he's hoping that Jesus will return soon and not take Christians and believers away to heaven somewhere. But what he's waiting for is he's waiting for the recreation of the earth in perfection. So that those ancient stories from the Psalms about the lion laying down with the lamb and all creation being at peace can come about. But he still has in his theology trouble embracing, the implications of the incarnation, the idea that God became flesh and lives still and is present in the flesh. And, following from Paul, there's a whole history of Christian theologians and Christian thinkers and Christian people who have found it difficult to embrace the idea that God is really present in the flesh of Jesus first. Maybe he just appeared to be in the flesh of Jesus, but really wasn't in the flesh of Jesus. And then also embracing the idea that if you want to know where God is, you've got to look around in the flesh to the people who are around you and to the creation that is around you, and that's where you will find God. And instead, so many have embraced some form of teaching that held that, well, maybe God was present in some unique way in Jesus, but not in the rest of us, and not in the earth. And so the goal of the Christian life for many is not to be corrupted by this world, but to get ready so we can be delivered from this world for the next. I noticed this morning that even appears in one of the hymns that we sang this morning, Away in a Manger. Fit us for heaven.